Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Dr. Mona Ismail. I'm the Dean of the Scientific College of Design. And on behalf of the OA QHE Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you today. We have a special webinar planned for you today with Dr. Tess. I would like to welcome everyone. I would like to start with a couple of etiquette points. All microphones are muted. Please communicate through the Q&A for questions and interventions. We can also turn on the mics and you can make your own interventions if you want, but please try to make it short so that we can give a chance to everyone. Our webinar series, the last two series, was aligning higher education strategies with Vision 2040 with His Highness Sayyid Dr. Adham Al Saeed. And we also had a webinar by Dr. Khalid Al Mishekhi from the Far University, and he discussed with us students' mental health during the online teaching, and Dr. Nabila was the moderator. Today we have Dr. Tess. We welcome her back. It's great to see you, Dr. Tess, again. And I'm sure you don't need an introduction, and everyone today knows you. However, just to give you credit, I would still like to have a quick introduction about you. I would like to introduce you to everyone. Dr. Tess Goodlife is a higher education quality consultant and trainer based in France. She was formerly the Deputy CEO for Technical Affairs for the Oman Academic Accreditation Authority, the OAAA back then. She supported the management and implementation of the two-stage institutional accreditation and the audits, which started in 2007, actually, with the workshops and the capacity building for the sector, and then the audits started later. She also worked on reviewing the General Foundation Program, provision of capacity building for institution and external reviewers, and supporting the development of the revised Oman Qualification Framework. Dr. Tess is now working with higher education institutions and quality agencies in all areas of development, strategies, review, and capacity development, as well as working with the OAAA QA now, as she has worked with the Ministry of Education, Myanmar, through Cardinal and AUC Aid, University Grant Commission, Sri Lanka, Knowledge and Human Development Authority in the UAE, Education and Training Quality Authority in Bahrain, and SARUA in Southern Africa, and ISPD in Belgium. Dr. Goodlife has been a reviewer for the OAAA in Scotland, and has also served as a reviewer of the Bahrain Quality Assurance Agency and UAB in Dubai. Juliet, if you can stop sharing this. There you go. Dr. Tess, the mic is yours. Again, I'm really excited, so as everyone here today, excited to see you again. We couldn't be more enthusiastic and wanting to hear what you have to say to us today for us.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to show my screen. Could you let me know if you can see my screen, yeah?
Yes, we do. We can.
So first of all, what an honor and a privilege it is to be able to be here presenting for the OAQHE, as it's an organization close to my heart. I was very involved with it when it was the OQNHE, and we've got people involved now on the board, and it's a fantastic organization, and I think the credit to the OQNHE is to the sector and the volunteers and the people who give up their time to support the network. This network is unique, and other when we've presented it in Quahe and conferences around the world, people have appreciated that this is a network like no other. It's a collegiate network. It's not institutions in competition with each other, but it's institutions working with each other and providing opportunities to learn from each other, as well as bringing in people from outside the network who can perhaps give some insight and understanding of what's happening elsewhere. So hats off to the OAQHE, which I think now must be 16 years old. 2006, I think it was established originally. So well done, and congratulations and hats off to the chair of the board and all the board members for what they're doing, and of course the member organisations. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And for those of you who may remember me from Oman, I miss Oman, but I'm here in France. It's not very sunny. It's a bit grey today, but spring is springing, and it's not such a bad place to be. What we're going to do today is look at institutional versus programme accreditation and implications for institutions. Please feel free to use the chat if you have any questions or things that you'd like to raise. I'd like to try and make this as interactive as possible so that we'll try and respond in real time where we can, or otherwise we're going to have questions and answers at the end. This presentation is not only based on my experience with the OAAA QA, but it's also, as Dr. Mona kindly mentioned, that I have had experience in other countries, in Dubai, Bahrain, Sri Lanka, and other parts of the world that have given me a little bit of insight into the programme accreditation. I am not going to be talking about the OAAA QA programme standards assessment, because that's something that the OAAA QA will give training on. However, having worked on the pilot, I do have a little bit of insight into some of the challenges that institutions face, and it's not just in Oman, but it's the implications for programme accreditation globally. So, without further ado, this is what we're going to be talking about this morning. So we're going to be talking about the international context of accreditation. Now, it's quite easy to well, easy is maybe an unfair word, but it's quite, we kind of get stuck in our day-to-day of what's happening within our institution, within our region, within our town, within our country. And I think it's good from time to time to remind ourselves of the international kind of context and what's happening globally, and why what we're doing as educators is still really important and relevant to a bigger global climate. We're going to look at the difference, or some of the features of the difference between institutional and programme accreditation. We're going to be looking at the features of programme accreditation. What does it look like? The role of international and external programme accreditation. And I'm going to be asking some of my colleagues to perhaps chip in here with their personal experiences of undertaking external accreditation. We're going to look at some of the challenges and some of the things we need to bear in mind when we're putting ourselves forward for programme accreditation and preparing for programme accreditation, and the implications for institutions. What does it mean to be preparing? Some of you will be familiar with accreditation. I know that nearly a large number of institutions in Oman have been accredited, and nearly everybody's been through some kind of review or accreditation process. So you should all be familiar with it to some extent. Anyway, let's have a look at the current international context of accreditation. Some of you may be aware of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which were developed further to the Millennium Goals that were leading up to 2000. These are the UN Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. And goal number 4 is quality education. It's right up there as being one of the development goals globally and is an important driver of quality in the world. So, as you probably know, these are developed by United Nations and UNESCO, the United Nations the United Nations agency responsible for education, science and culture, supports quality assured higher education. It's an important feature of the education landscape. And Sustainable Development Goal 4 has a target of 4.3, which ensures equal access for all women and men to affordable, quality technical, vocational and tertiary education, including university. So what we're doing in Oman is part of a much bigger picture about quality education and what we're doing to provide that and providing equal access. So why is quality assurance global? Why does it matter that we've got important quality assurance? Sorry, right. I'm just going to try and move that so I can see my screen. Right. So 89% growth in higher education in the last 15 years, with around 200, currently there are over 200 million students enrolled in universities around the world, and that number seems to increase to over 400 million by the time we get to 2030, and over 522 million by the time we get to 2035. That is an enormous increase in the number of people involved in higher education or undertaking higher education programs. And therefore, higher education has to keep up. Programs need to be enriched. They need to be relevant. We're offering programs now that we didn't offer 10 years ago. Look at the growth in things like big data and cybersecurity. There are programs that we didn't even know we needed 10 years ago. So looking at the global context, not only the needs of Oman, but the regional needs and the international needs, drive institutions to look at their programs. And UNESCO is expecting the members of the UN globally to enhance the quality assurance capacities and policies in higher education. And this is about strengthening quality assurance mechanism. This is about the work of the OAAQA and other bodies around the region, and looking at the frameworks, the qualifications frameworks, other frameworks that are used to underpin quality assurance networks. But this, I think, is the most important part. Good structures for the quality assurance of education, of higher education, are crucial for enabling trust in a qualification and protecting academic standards and integrity. And it's that trust. When you wave an accreditation certificate in the air, that's what you're saying, that we're trusted, that we meet academic standards, that we have integrity in our organization. So these good structures, good systems are paramount to underpinning trust. And without trust, I mean, we did a session on trust for inquiry. We did a conference paper. Without trust, you can't, people won't accept qualifications. It's about further education opportunities. It's about employers. It's about promotion. It's about having the right people doing the right jobs in the right way, with the right background, experience and qualification. So trust is really important, and it's recognized globally. And we know that quality assurance and having accredited programs reflect the trust in the programs that you deliver. Moving then to Oman, I haven't got the latest statistics, but up to 2019, you can see there has been growth. They've got 118,000 in higher education, and that increased. I think the number's a bit bigger than that now. But as you can see, we've got a little bit of a curve in growth, but you can we know that the numbers are continuing to grow, despite the forecast in the late 90s that Oman would reach its demographic bulge in about 2015. In fact, Oman's needs for higher education have continued to grow. And it's not only school leavers. I think many of you have got growth in your institutions, have got growth in master's programs and in students enrolling who have already got jobs. So that is another growth area in Oman. It's not just about school leavers, but it's about meeting the needs of students who are already employed, who are seeking professional development opportunities, that are committed to lifelong learning. So this also changes things for the profile of the institutions and the type of programs that you deliver, as well as the type of delivery environments that you offer. Staying global then, why is higher education important? And the World Bank has has an education strategy from 2020. Why is the World Bank important? Because a lot of money for what developing countries do comes from the World Bank. And I think having that kind of global perspective on the importance of higher education kind of reminds us of why we do what we do. And I think the key things to take away from this World Bank view is that well-educated people are more employable and productive, earn higher wages, but also we prepare our students to be active members of their communities and societies. So it's not only the body of knowledge that they're going away with, but also it's all the other things that you do with your students. It's the engagement with communities, it's the working with industry and professions that kind of open out students' viewpoints to be able to be active members of their society. So I think we can't forget the role that we're playing. You know, we kind of see our students coming in from school, we teach them and then we put them in employment. But in fact, university and college education is so much more than that, because you've got some of your students, especially school leavers, are at a crucial point in transition in their lives, and you have such an impact on what will happen in the future. The other thing to remember is that they are the economic returns. Remember, this is the World Bank, so they've got an economic interest in higher education. But the economic returns for tertiary education are the highest in the educational system. It's 17% increase in earnings if you've got a degree. This is a global perspective. So maybe we'd have to do it, you know, country by country to see if Oman really was up to 17%. But I think we all know that if you're a graduate, that the opportunities for you are so much greater than if you're just leaving with a secondary school certificate. So I think these are things to remind ourselves why it's important to think about the type of education we offer, but also about the credibility of the education that we offer. And this is where accreditation comes in. One of the things that the World Bank, I mentioned, they've got an education strategy 2020. And one of the key points they make in this kind of vision for the future is that there needs to be stronger linkages between higher education and the labour market. So that is not something, and we'll talk about this later, but this isn't something to be left with your careers advisory department. This is everybody's responsibility. You as academics, you as people working within your institution, you talk to people all the time that are linked to industry and professions. How can we build on that and formalise that within your programs to benefit your programs and ultimately benefit the students? So let's have a look at program and institutional accreditation. Right, I haven't got a poll here, but how many of you have been through an accreditation process? So I can't see you all, but if you'd like to raise your hands, I can feel your energy coming across the screen. That how many of you have been through an accreditation process? And I'd like you to think about your accreditation that you've been through. Was it institutional level? Was it program? Were you very involved with it? Were you a key member? Were you part of a team? Were you part of a working group? Thinking about the type of accreditation processes you may be familiar with. So why does accreditation matter? Well, first of all, we've talked about the credibility, we've talked about the trust, we've talked about the integrity and the upholding of academic standards. What we're looking at are threshold standards to prove that graduates are ready to enter the profession. So what you're saying when you graduate an engineer, an IT specialist, an architect, a doctor, an interior designer, a business professional, that this student, this graduate has met the standards required to perform in the professions they choose to enter. And that accreditation also shows that institutions are committed to the students' educational experience. And we can't really forget that the students are at the centre of everything that we do. And accreditation provides value, because what we're doing is we're saying to students, institutions, faculty, the industry around the world, and to the public about the qualification or the institution that's being accredited. We're saying this institution has reached this level. This program has reached these standards. So it's about the value added of what you're doing as an education institution. What I'm going to do now, because I'm not going to focus on Oman, because the program standards are still in development, but I'm going to look at some of our neighbours in Bahrain and in the UAE to have a look at the difference between the focus of institutional accreditation and the focus of program accreditation, because they are different. So looking at the Bahrain, this is the Bahrain Qualifications and Quality Authority, and they've got 8 standards for the institutional review framework. So none of these should kind of be of a surprise to you if you're familiar with the 9 areas of the Omani scope that we cover with the OAAA QA. So for standard 1, they've got mission, governance and management. Standard 2, quality assurance and enhancement. Standard 3 is about the resources, IT and the infrastructure that supports the IT. The quality of teaching and learning, student support services, human resources management, research, community engagement. So these are high-level activities within the institution. How are they developed? How are they supported? How do they feed down? So it's this top-down overview of the institution and all its key activities. Looking at the program review framework in Bahrain, however, they've got 4 what they call indicators. And they have the learning program, the efficiency of the program, so that covers all areas such as assessment, benchmarking, all the areas that you would expect to use as measurement, student retention and progression, engagement with employers. Then you've got the academic standards of graduates, which is how they meet the learning outcomes of the program, how they're being assessed, how do you show that learning is taking place, and the effectiveness of quality management and assurance. So what are all the quality management tools in place, and what are the policies that are being followed? How is the program being monitored? So you can see that compared to the institutional level, which are all the big ticket items, the focus in Bahrain is about the program, the learning program itself. And it's about how effective that program is in delivering what it says it's doing. So it's about how those institutional level systems trickle down or are implemented at the program level. Let's look at the UAE now. This is the Commission for Academic Accreditation. And they have 7 institutional level standards. They have a slightly different system because the CAA are responsible for licensing as well as accreditation, so that there is a clear link between when an institution is licensed and a program is accredited. So there's 2 slightly different processes. They're not completely the same as other bodies. However, I think it's still valuable to look at their governance and management and the other areas of activity. So this is what they're looking at, the 7 institutional level standards. Again, governance and management, quality assurance, research and scholarly activities, health, safety, and environment has its own standard, interestingly. It's not embedded in another one. These are the fiscal resources, financial management and budgeting, legal compliance and public disclosure, and community engagement. This is very much, because they're used for licensing, this is all very much about making sure that the institution is fit to run. And it's interesting and this is a debate we can have on another day around a cup of coffee, is that both Bahrain and the UAE have separate standards for quality assurance, whereas the OAC, when we developed the quality the quality audit manual and the scope in 2006, 2007, 2008, that was very much agreed upon that we would embed quality in everything. So there wouldn't be a set aside heading, although ROSCA did have quality as a separate component. But anyway, it just as that was an aside and a debate that we can have on another day. Should quality assurance be a separate entity? So at institutional level, then, this is about fit for purpose. Is the institution doing what it's meant to be doing in order to be able to run? Has it got the right governance management in place? Has it got all the policies and the review schedules in place? Has it got a research plan? Is it a healthy and safe place to work? It's about the money. Have they got the right money? And are they meeting all the legal obligations? And of course, the importance of community engagement. Whereas for the program focus, because they're doing the institutional licensing and relicensing, at program level, they're looking at the nitty-gritty. They're looking again at quality assurance, the actual programs themselves, research and quality. This is where the CAA look at staffing, they look at how students are supported, and they look at the Learning Resource Centre. So you can see that this is very much both Bahrain and the UAE are really honing in on the big things that matter to the program. It's what drives the program. It's your program itself, it's your research and how that feeds into scholarly activities, it's your staff that you've got running the program, how you're supporting the students, and the resources that you're providing for that program. So this is very much honing in on those levels for the program level accreditation. One of the joys of doing these webinars on screen is that you can show really small text and everybody can still read it, I hope. The reason I'm showing you this, I think, goes to show the level of detail that you need to provide in program accreditation. Now, this was used as one of the benchmarks when we were developing the program accreditation approaches for the OAAA QA. But I think it's useful to see what a program specification looks like. And this really are the nuts and bolts of the program. And this is submitted at the time of the application of the review document, when the institution submits the review document for program accreditation. And this is all expected to be submitted. So you've got your title, who's responsible for developing the program, the dates, when it was accredited, any international accreditation, who's responsible for delivering the program, and if it's an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary program where joint responsibility lies, if there's a delivery support partner, how is it delivered, face-to-face or online or blended learning, part-time, full-time? What are the educational aims of the program learning outcomes? What does it mean to complete the program? What is the expectation in terms of study hours and the number of units and modules to be completed, credit hours if it's the American system? How are students supported in their learning? The criteria for admission? What are the facilities available? How is the quality and standards of teaching and learning evaluated? The assessment plan? How do you measure quality and standards? What are your indicators? And the schedule of delivery, program outcomes, learning methods, assessment methods. So you can see it's really a very comprehensive document that you would need to be able to produce for each program when you submit it for accreditation. And these are all the things that need to be in place for anybody outside the organization to understand the framework of the program, how it's being delivered, and how it's being assessed. I think the program specification is a very useful document and a useful benchmark for institutions preparing for program accreditation, whether it's external or whether it's within country, because I think it really reminds us of all the things that need to be in place, that tells an external panel member or an external reviewer what the program looks like, what are the features of the program. And I think, it's quite a useful checklist to remind us of what's needed to be submitted. However, we've been looking at a little bit about the differences between institutional and program accreditation. So this idea of this global, this wide view, and then this much more focused view. However, there are some elements that are the same between the two. I think the key one, which is the INQUAHE, the International Network for Quality Assurance Agencies in Higher Education. Quality is the responsibility of the institution. Ultimately, an institution is responsible for its own quality. So this is taken from ROSCA, which was developed in 2003-2004 in Oman. So an institution is expected to effectively manage the quality of its programs using benchmarks and internal and external reference points that it considers to be appropriate for its programs, its mission, and its circumstances. So this is about the institution ultimately taking responsibility for its program. The other thing that's the same between institutional and program accreditation is that there needs to be a quality cycle in place. In the case of Oman, we refer to ADRI, but it could be PDSA. It could be any plan, do, review cycle that is used. But the idea is that quality is a result of sustainable systems. And people will have heard me say this before, but you may have the most fabulous community outreach activity going on, but it all goes around this one person. And if that person leaves in your institution, then what happens to your community outreach? It's the same with professional relationships, especially at program level, that you may have a really active chapter of the IEEE, for example, in your institution, but it's very closely associated with a single member of staff. What happens if that single member of staff goes? There may be something going on really well in your institution, but it just happens to be because it's the right day on the right time. But is it a result of a planned, sustainable system that can be reviewed and improved? And that sustainability is really important. It's about its effectiveness. I think we all have people within our institutions that we depend on heavily. But what would happen if that person left? How is knowledge management handled? And how can we ensure that these good people are recognized, but also what they do is absorbed into a more systemic approach to what we do? The other thing that's the same with both institutional and program accreditation is the support for students, particularly in terms of future employability. We do look at institutional level accreditation. You look at how the institution as a whole has graduate attributes, how it measures graduate success, how it monitors. In the case of Oman, you've got the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, have their graduate destination surveys and graduate feedback surveys. And that happens at institutional level. But in future employability is very clearly linked to the programs that students are undertaking. So in both ways, supporting students, both in terms of resources and supporting them for future employability is really important. Part of on-the-job training, it's part of student placement, it's the guest lectures, it's how we engage with industry, how we prepare students for the workplace. The other thing that's the same is the consideration of context, where people are working, the institution that they're working in, the stakeholders that they're serving, and the national regulations. As you know, anybody who's been through institutional accreditation, you'll be aware of the expectations that health and safety regulations, Omani labour law, that there are other outside regulations that need to be respected within the accreditation process. The other thing that's the same which will come as no surprise, is the importance of benchmarking. And I appreciate that benchmarking is challenging. And one of the advantages of the OAQHE is you've got some fabulous people around the table sharing the same challenges and facing the same problems, and also having the different successes. So let's have a look. How are you managing it? I appreciate there's confidentiality. There is an element of competition, let's not deny it, but at the same time benchmarking can be carried out within a supportive environment. That means that you're sharing the data, you agree beforehand the data that you're willing to share, and then you do something about it. I mean, the number of times I've seen an Excel spreadsheet with this is the program we're running, and this is what they do in this country, and this is what they do here, and it's just a kind of a table showing comparison. But what happens as a result of that comparison? What changes are made in benchmarking? And I think that that's really something that the sector, not just in Oman, but generally really needs to work on. And the thing, people say, well, people don't really want to benchmark. But in fact, within the right environment and with the right benchmarking policy and with the right benchmarking agreements, you can have successful benchmarking. And I don't think it can be underestimated, the importance of benchmarking. And the other thing that's the same is the actual process of review itself. In most cases, with both institutional and external program accreditation, whether national or external, will have the process of some kind of self-review, that there will be some kind of visit or consideration of documentation, which will result in a report which vary in length, or and with some kind of recognition of accreditation certificate, some kind of stamp. So, and the principles, I think, the principles of underpin both institutional and program accreditation. I think that the process, whether at institutional or program level, is key and very important to ensure the validity of the process. So we've talked about the difference between institutional and program accreditation in general. So let's look at some of the features of program accreditation. Now, this is from the PSA manual, but because it's taken from an earlier document when we were developing the conceptual design framework for program standards, I think it's also something that we've all kind of agreed about the definition of what a program is. So, and I think this is a really useful definition, which is repeated in many agencies of how we define a program. So the important thing is that a program is a coherent learning experience. So it's made up of different building blocks that all contribute to a whole, which is followed by a student, that leads to successful completion, which qualifies them for an academic award. So there's a qualification at the end of it. And the learning experience that we talk about as a coherent learning experience is all aspects of the input of the program, which is the design and the curriculum, as well as the program delivery process, where we look at teaching, learning, and assessment. So this, I think, is a helpful reminder of what are we talking about when we talk about program accreditation. There's also a program cluster, and this in Oman will be part of the, well, it is suggested that this will be part of the program accreditation. That if we're going, and this happens in the UAE, and it also happens in Bahrain, that if you're going in to look at a program that is in a cognate academic field, so it could be an area of engineering, for example, that share many modules, or it could be a business program with different pathways that perhaps result in the student being awarded a slightly different qualification, but there is a considerable commonality between the programs. A cluster of programs may be considered within the review. So rather than, if you're coming in to look at a BA, it could be also, it could be vertical. I'm not necessarily saying this for Oman, but it could be going in to look at an MBA, it could be looking at a BBA in human resources, in marketing, and where there are common areas, it will be a cluster that's considered as part of the accreditation process. And as I say, this happens in the UAE, it happens in quite a few places where to save on resources, and if you've got programs that are very similar, they can be accredited at the same time. One of the purposes of program accreditation, it's not just about the input. There was a great presentation by an American educator a few years ago that basically showed the history of accreditation. So when they were doing accreditation in sort of the 1930s, 40s, 50s of school education, it was all about how many books you had and how big your classrooms were. And it was all about the input. And I think as accreditation has grown over the years, has moved, has evolved, that we're interested in the input, the context of the learning environment, but also the output, the outcome, and the impact and how we measure that. This will obviously sing to the hearts of process engineers, but you get the idea that what we're looking at, it's not just whether you've got a nice library, but it's about how that library is used, how you measure student use of the library, are the students satisfied with the quality, and the staff, the quality of the library, and how are students encouraged to engage with the library. So when people, whether in Sri Lanka or whether in Bahrain or Dubai, and when people walk me into rooms and they show me and they say, oh, this library is beautiful, it's got 23,000 books, and we've got a fabulous online system, and I say, right, well, how many students are actually using it? That's about the context and how useful is your library provision in supporting the delivery of your program. And that's where you start to measure the output, outcome, and impact. Students don't know how good a library is unless they're encouraged to use it. So library surveys, you know, in many contexts are going to be about, are students comfortable going to the library? Are they actually using the library? Is it embedded in the curriculum? Is the expectation to use the library and use resources in the library assessed somewhere beyond foundation program? And I'm talking about the actual academic program. So it's important when we're looking at the context. We're looking at the system level process, the institutional level, the program level, and the course or module level context. So program accreditation isn't just about the input, it's about the input, the context, and the output. You could argue it would be the same at the institutional level as well, but I think at the program level, we've got more of an idea of what's happening here, what the context is, and how you measure the effectiveness. It's a smaller unit in which to focus on in terms of accreditation. Ultimately, it's about program credibility and its fitness for purpose. When you're accredited, they're saying that this program is doing what it says on the box. It's producing graduates that have met the learning outcomes, that are able to work in the profession or in an environment with the skills required to be a successful member of that professional field, of that organisation, of that further education opportunity. So the features of program accreditation, they're based on external standards, as we said, with institutional accreditation. There may be prerequisites. So for example, in the case of Oman, it's a prerequisite that you have institutional accreditation. In the case of the UAE, it's a prerequisite that you will be licensed before you can be accredited. For some external qualifications or some external program accreditation, they require you to have national accreditation before they will consider you for external accreditation. So there may be prerequisites for program accreditation. As I mentioned before, we've got the process of self-review, a visit and a report, and an accreditation outcome. The use of peer review, subject experts. Now, at program level, you really do need to have peers who are teaching on the subjects that are in the programs that are being accredited. That if it's an engineering, mechanical engineering program, then you need to have mechanical engineers on on the panel. If it's an accounting program, you need to have accountants on, or people who teach accounting or are familiar with the delivery of accounting programs on the panel. This is much more the case than with institutional, because institutional, you're looking at the global. If you've got an online institution, if you've got an institution that's delivering a lot of its programs online, I mean, not COVID, but otherwise, you do need to have somebody on board who understands the online learning environment. And if you're a dentist college, you need to have somebody who understands dentistry, because you're only running a couple of programs. But for program accreditation, the panels of program accreditation need to have subject experts. It's, I think, really important that that body of professionals, of the body of practitioners, are on those panels. And I have a recommendation at the end that if you are a professional in a particular field, you might like to consider putting yourself forward as an external reviewer for the OAAQA, and if not, for other agencies such as the BQA in Bahrain that are always looking for program subject experts. The other feature of program accreditation is looking at the institutional system in terms of how the program is being delivered. So we're looking at areas such as how are curricula developed and reviewed, how programs developed and reviewed. The program development and review is a little bit harder because many programs, particularly in the institutions you're working in, many will have been in place for 10, 15 years. So it's about how is that program kept up to date? How is that program retained? Is it still recruiting students, and is it still relevant? We're looking at staffing, we're looking at industry engagement, and we're looking at resource provision. And I'll talk a little bit more about industry engagement later, because I don't think we can underestimate the importance of industry engagement at program level. The other, as I've mentioned earlier, more than one program may be reviewed at a time. That wide range of stakeholders are interviewed during the site visit, that there will be students, alumni, so that's program alumni, as well as professional body, advisory body members, people that the program engage with outside the institution, as well as level of management and governance bodies within the institution where they play a role in program accreditation. And this isn't links to qualification frameworks isn't just relevant to Oman, but it's also places like Bahrain, where and as you could see from the extract from the program specification for the CAA, for the qualifications framework in the Emirates, that there is a clear link to a program being put on a qualifications framework and its status on the qualification framework and its levels and how the program, the level of the program of each year of output is aligned to the qualification framework, well, the actual qualification itself. So if it's a level 5, level 6, level 7, how you prove that that's linked to that qualification framework. The other feature of program accreditation, and this is where it's different to say something like rankings, is that this accreditation outcome is time bound. Now, in the case of Oman, it's 5 years. I think it's the same in Bahrain. In some of the, so for example, ABET, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, there is different timelines depending on how successful or whether it's a re-accreditation process. So some external program accrediting bodies will be will have a different timeline for the maturity of the institution. So some will be 4 years, some will be 6 years, some will be 7 years. One of the things that's come across from the literature and from people's experience, that accreditation is very much a learning experience. And I think you'll all appreciate that if you have been involved, not just program accreditation, that's true, institutional accreditation. But I think the difference with program accreditation is that it involves more academic staff because it's about the program you're delivering. And compared to institutional, I would argue that program accreditation is more external facing, that in your institution, you're the only department running this program. How do you know if you're doing any good? So you can't really compare your program with other programs that are being run in the institution because they're different module structure, different content. And so you need to look out with your institution, other institutions running the program, at affiliates, professional bodies. So that external looking part of program accreditation can't be underestimated. It is so important because you can't benchmark your own program within your institution in terms of content and appropriateness for the field of study that your students are working in. This is actually, it's taken from the process that is used in Oman, but I've adjusted it to show that this is kind of the process that you can see in nearly all EQA external quality assurance agencies, whereas you get the institution undertaking some sort of reflective study, reflective activity that results in a self-study, in a review report. In the case of Oman, it could be an application or it could be a portfolio. That the external quality assurance body will form a review panel, that there'll be a self-review submitted, that there's usually some kind of preliminary meeting held, usually online nowadays, where the panel get together and discuss the documentation that they've received. There's some kind of planning meeting that may or may not involve the panel. In the case of Bahrain, it's all done by the agency and the panel doesn't get involved. You develop some sort of program for the site visit, and then the site visit is undertaken, and then a report is drafted. And those vary how some of them are completed on site before the panel leave. The site visit, and I think this is something that's helpful to remember, is just one part of the whole process. The documentation is key, particularly these days if a site visit is going to be carried out virtually. The panel is much more dependent on documentation and evidence that's submitted electronically than they would have been before. In most cases, institutions, in fact all the bodies I've worked in, institutions are allowed to, or they're encouraged to respond to the reports they've received following the initial parts of the process, that the panel will review this, that the board or the Senate or the council or however the EQA is run will approve the final report, and then an accreditation certificate is issued. So this is pretty much a standard process, which is common across the way. And the program accreditation, as you can see, staff will be very involved in the undertaking of the self-study. Staff will be involved very much in preparing for the site visit, preparing all the documentation, and in reviewing the report once it's been submitted to the institution following the visit. Okay, what are the benefits of program accreditation? Now, this is actually taken from the draft manual, but as I said, this is taken from the also the conceptual design framework. So, but this is taken from the PSA manual. But I don't think I'm breaching any confidence because I think it's really helpful to share what the benefits are. And the idea of program accreditation is to confirm that programs and qualifications are of a sound standard, and that they can be recognized internationally, particularly in agencies where the program standards have been internationally benchmarked. The other thing, obviously, is the importance of academic discipline benchmarks and or professional requirements. The program accreditation is important in supporting, advising, and giving feedback to institutions on how their academic standards are maintained and the quality of their programs. The other thing not to lose sight of is the importance of quality improvement and quality enhancement at both program and institutional levels. That you're not just staying here, but there is a sense of progress, that there's a sense of learning from implementing the delivery of a program, from how can it be improved, what differences can we make as we move into the future, how can we make it better. The other thing about program accreditation and certification is the importance of being able to provide independent information and assurance to the public, government bodies, funding bodies, and other stakeholders of the good standing of program and its qualification. And that, I think, public confidence, we talked about at the very beginning about trust in the integrity of the qualification of the program. And I think that the accreditation process needs to support that, and having clear evidence, having panels that follow a clear process consistently really does give understanding to the public that this program, this qualification is fit for purpose. And also it allows you as institutions to be able to say, ooh, we've got program accreditation, that this program has been externally verified and it's satisfied that independent body. And I know that seeking international program accreditation is really important, because you're on the world stage and you're saying, right, well, we've got EQUIS, or we've got, you know, AMBA, whichever body accreditation, we've got ABET accreditation. You know, we've been recognized by, you know, the American Computer Society. You know, these are all credentials that an institution can shout about, put on its website, let people know that it's meeting international standards through its external accreditation of its programs. Now, I appreciate I've been talking for nearly an hour. So do we need a break, or shall I just carry on? I'm happy to be led by you. Do we need a comfort break, or shall I move on?
Let's move on, unless we want to stop for questions.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I will move on. So looking at the role of international accreditation, it's nice to know that Dr. Mona's there, because I'm about to hand over to her for a couple of minutes in a second. I've talked about international accreditation, external accreditation, and what it would be good is for you to have a think about how many of you working in institutions have got external program accreditation. So this is where non-OAAA, outside Oman has come in to look at your programs and give it a stamp to say that we've met these standards. So just be aware of that. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Mona just to tell us. I understand that you, Dr. Mona, are heading for or looking at external program accreditation. Can you tell us why?
We actually opted to head for two different international program accreditation activities. I think to recruit more international students, as well as to gain credibility of other international students as well as the national ones. Also, because we have stopped our affiliation once we got the institutional accreditation. And the point was, since we no longer have this external body reviewing annually our programs, to have an accreditation, international accreditation with an external body reviews the systems, as well as the certification of the programs. So we're doing one now with Jordan, and we're doing one with a specialized agency in art and design in the US called NASA, the National Association of Schools of Art and Design.
Taki, do you want to say a little bit? Thank you very much, Dr. Mona. That was really helpful. Dr. Taki, do you want to say, Professor Taki, do you want to say a little bit about yours?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. I think probably I'll talk about the professional bodies, because recently we were involved with the CIPD, SCCA, CIMA, and the Chartered Institute of Computing in UK. And I think the question always very important, because any accreditation, there is a cost involved. But I think in addition to what you have covered and Dr. Ramona covered, I think really one of the big challenges which we have in the area, not only in Oman, most of the countries, is really unemployment. And I think when we get our program accredited by the professional bodies, that give us really a lot of confidence that our graduates will find a job. But to be honest, going through the 5 bodies which I have mentioned, the biggest challenge is really the mapping and alignment of the program with their requirement. And that can sometimes, you see, you get very good news where you see, okay, we're aligning and we can get 50%, 70% of a credit when we talk, for example, level 7, which is a master level in UK. So your MBA graduates get a credit of level 6. But the bad news, when you see your programs are not mapping with their, standards, it's big headache. You have to go through again of the process of getting your programs accredited, and that's long process. Sometimes takes 1 year or more. Your internal board of trustee goes to the ministry, goes to the external, and sometimes you get a comment from the externals here, which probably does not meet the requirement and the main purpose why you want to do the changes in your program. So I think my experience really was like wow to me when we done the mapping and alignment our program with the international accreditation. Because in the end of the day, if I get my program accredited by CIMA, SCCA, CIPD, and they don't give any exemptions to my level 6 or level 7 students, what is the purpose of it? That clearly shows that there's a problem in aligning the outcomes of the two different institutions.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. And that's helpful from both of you. Thank you. And I will carry on. You raise a good point there, Professor Taki, because when our colleagues in SQU, the College of Education was seeking CAEP, or at the time it was NCATE, I think, accreditation for teacher education. It was a 5-year process from the original visit that they had to actually starting. It was like 5 years in preparation and incredibly expensive. I mean, they had specialized consultants that came in to support them that worked at the College of Education for a number of years in order to get that accreditation. So it can be costly. Let's have just a quick consideration of the difference between national and external program accreditation. External accreditation is very useful because obviously, as you say, it's benchmarked with international practice. It's interesting, Dr. Mona was saying about the attraction of international students. And it's true that if you're offering programs that have been internationally accredited, it's going to give you good pulling power for the international students that may want to come and study in Oman. International external program accreditation also supports the mobility of student qualifications. If you're going from country to country or region to region, that you've got a qualification that's been externally accredited can help that mobility, that transferability of the qualification. The other thing, as you said very helpfully, Professor Taki, is the importance of the mapping of the engagement, of looking at how professional accreditation bodies, how their standards map against the programs that you're delivering. But also it helps create this link between you and the professional body, that it means that you've got a partnership and that you've got people that you can refer to. People have said, well, why do we need a national? We've been accredited as an institution. Why do we need a national program accreditation activity, whether you're in Bahrain or whether you're in the UAE or whether you're in Oman? Why do we need it? Because the standards and the nature of the process, it means that you've got a level playing field. So not all external accrediting bodies have the same processes and have the same level of rigor. And also, I think it helps compare like with like within Oman when you've got a national accreditation system. And it's also about the expectations of the public and the stakeholders and the funding bodies, that they understand the accreditation of the program. I think there is value in national accreditation, but we know that the OAAA QA, and Dr. Muna has been involved with this project, as I understand it, is looking at the list of international accrediting bodies and how that can be kind of considered in the whole of the OAAA QA activity. But I can't speak on behalf of the OAAA QA because I know that they will be talking about that in the future. But I do understand that there is consideration of the role of bona fide, well-respected program accreditation bodies. Watch out for program accreditation mills. These are bodies that pretend to be able to give you program accreditation, but in fact, they do more harm than good because they are not a bona fide accreditation body. So see, these are some of the, in Oman and in the region, these are some of the external accrediting bodies that people have used. I know for the GU Tech, they looked at Aquim because it's a German-based accrediting body, but and each one will have different expectations in terms of standards, in terms of mapping, in terms of, I think many of you will be familiar, people with an engineering background will be familiar with ABET and the expectations of the knowledge and the learning outcomes that's covered on the program in order for you to be able to get ABET accreditation. But I think it is worth, it's certainly worth doing your research about which external program accreditation body you use, and talk to other people, talk to other institutions about the experiences they've had of international accreditation and external accreditation. Now, what are the challenges? And I think this is really important. These are the challenges of program accreditation. And as I say, this isn't just from my Oman experience, but it's from my experience working on panels in many different places. Number one, data, data, data. And the biggest challenge is being able to access data that is specific and relevant to the program. It's really important that from now that you have the right student management system, the right enterprise resource planning systems in place to be able to give you the data you need at program level. So we're talking about not just student achievement and student assessment, but all the surveys that you carry out, all the activities that you do, whether it's alumni, students, staff. How can you show that this is relevant and pertains to the actual program that is subject to the accreditation process? I cannot stress strongly enough how important it is to be able to present program relevant data to reflect the quality, the delivery, and the support of your program. So the number of times that you're presented with survey results that show that 98% of students are very happy with the library, when you realize that these are all the students that are studying at the institution and not this particular program. So it doesn't give you a very good idea about the program level. It's the same with employability data, it's the same with graduate destinations, but it's not about the institutional information and data, but it's about the program level data. I cannot stress strongly enough how important disaggregated data is to the panel, because that is what gives the profile. That's what tells us about the profile of your program. That's the information that talks about the success of delivery of the program. That's the information that talks about the success of the outputs of the program. Data, data, data. The other thing to bear in mind for program accreditation is being very clear about the structure for the body delivering the program, how the management of the program works, where responsibility for different aspects of the program, for the curriculum development, for the engagement with industry, for the liaison with the rest of the institution. How does it work? What committees are at program level and how is the program represented in the wider context of the institution? How is the program represented on other decision-making bodies at the institutional level? So it's about how does the program and the department or the departments delivering this program, how does that work within the body of the institution? Because that says a lot about communication within the institution, how policies are disseminated, how information is disseminated, how what's decided at department level, what's decided at institutional level. It's really important that that structure is clearly delineated and communicated to the body, to the panel, to the people who are evaluating and accrediting the program. How does it work? How is the management of the program in reality? What's the structure in place? Almost as important as data is engagement with professions and professional bodies. Now, unlike institutional level, you, especially those amongst you who are academic staff, may be members already of professional bodies. You may be members, you may have professional status. As teaching staff, you may be have professional status. So that engagement with professions and professional bodies cannot be stressed enough. It's really important that we have that engagement because it's about currency of the program, it's about the legitimacy of the program. It's also making sure that the program is outward facing and not inward facing. It's your professions and your professional bodies that will talk about the expectations. There are professional bodies in Oman, but it's looking beyond Oman as well. But what do these professional bodies expect from these programs? I appreciate not every program, particularly in humanities areas, have professional bodies. However, there are opportunities to engage with the wider world to inform your program. And when you carry out program reviews, especially the major program reviews that are usually carried out every 5 or 6 years, that those professions and professional bodies are brought in to that program review. So because, you know, some areas, professional expectations are moving quicker than the time of the program review. If you're only reviewing your program in 5 years, for example, in an area like IT, things have moved on within that time. How do you know that? By engaging with professionals, professional bodies, and employers, and the expectations of employers. Now, some institutions may say, well, dealing with professions, that belongs to our community outreach department. You, as professional educators, are in the ideal position to engage with professions. It shouldn't be left to bodies outside your department or outside your program to engage with professions. It has to happen at program level because that's how it benefits the program. In UAE, in Bahrain, in Sri Lanka, the expectation is that professional bodies have some kind of reference, provide some kind of reference point to the programs that you're delivering to make sure that they're relevant, that they're current, and that they're useful. Linked to that are international benchmarks, which may not always be professional bodies, but how are you using international benchmarks to show the currency of your program, to show that your program is relevant? How do you keep up to date? And this, you know, if you've been running a program for 10 years and you're still using the same PowerPoint slides, how do you know that they're still relevant? How do you know they're still important? You know, I think that there's something to be said for kind of trying to review your teaching materials and the content of your program on a regular basis, if not annually. Many of you do have monitoring reports for your programs, and these program monitoring reports are really important because they indicate how you can improve, not just based on student feedback, but you looking outside your organization to what's happening at professional level. Many of you I know have advisory councils, advisory boards, and they're really important. And if you could try and encourage a little bit of externality into those advisory boards, especially these days since we're meeting online, you can reach out beyond Oman to get people to come and give you feedback on the programs that you're delivering and the relevance, the currency, and to ensure that they're fit for purpose. Alumni for the program are important because it's not just about your alumni as an institution. And to be honest, at program level, it's probably easier to keep that alumni relationship because you already have a good relationship with your alumni. You as program staff already know who your students are, who's going out to work in industry. Those alumni are really useful. Number one, because of the links in the industry if they're going to get jobs in their fields, but also in providing feedback on the program. I think the challenge is keeping up to date with the alumni, because we know they change numbers when they leave university or college. They may change their phone. It is a challenge to keep up with alumni. But you know, as an academic advisor, while your students are with you, you can start sowing the seeds of alumni, of belonging to this institution, of remaining in touch with the institution when they leave, because they are a very valuable resource for the development of your program. One of the things that we need to consider, and you just need to be aware of, going back to this idea of links with professional associations, many of you have overseas affiliates or partners who may be affiliated. They may have professional affiliation for their programs, but you just need to be aware that the professional accreditation of their programs in the States or in the UK may not travel, may not apply to the programs that you're delivering here. So you just need to be really aware of the status of your affiliates or your partners' program accreditation. Risk management is covered usually both at program level and at institutional level, but you really do need to ensure that there's a risk register or some kind of collection or awareness of risks at the program level, because it's quite easy to kind of look at the institutional level risk, but where are program level risks considered? Where are they discussed? At what level? How does that feed up to the institutional level risk register? Where is that talked about and documented? So I think that one of the challenges is how to show that there's been a discussion of program level risks. Another one of the challenges is ensuring that there are appropriate resources. That how many times do we hear from libraries that they say, oh, we send an email out to staff and ask them for the books that they would like us to stock, and they will let us know if they need them or not. You have a really important responsibility in ensuring that your students are able to access the key resources to undertake their programs successfully. And the use, I mean, it will vary, I appreciate, from subject to subject to institution to institution. Some of you will be very involved with your labs and the software and the hardware that's provided within laboratories. But even in subjects that may be less lab focused, there are resources that are offered at institutional level that you need to ensure that are appropriate for your program. You can't just take it for granted that somebody somewhere is going to make sure that the students have what they need in the library or access to the online documentation that or online resources that they need. And I sometimes feel that when we talk to program staff that there's a kind of a, well, that's somebody else's responsibility. And I think the message is it's your responsibility to make sure that you've got what you need. If there are budget restrictions, if there are challenges in getting the resources you need, that's something that needs to be raised at management level. But you know, I don't think you can just take it for granted that someone somewhere is going to make sure your students have the books and the resources and the electronic resources they need. When you're uploading stuff to Moodle, when you're using your online environment, how do you ensure that your students are able to fully engage and have the resources they need? This is one of my pet things, is that very often an institution, when you visit a program, and you start talking about career support, they say, well, no, that's the responsibility of that body over there. That's there. We don't deal with it because we have to teach the program. We're very busy. We're academic advisors. We're expected to do research. We have a lot of workload, and you're expecting us to support career? Yes. You are in an ideal situation as a professional to at least show an interest in student career support. Some institutions already do. You bring people in from the field, from industry, talk to your students. What are the opportunities for career support? The next step is helping students find those links with potential mentors, with potential people that can help them move into the industry. I don't think career support should just be a department that's alone in the institution. I think academic and program staff need to be actively involved to some extent. I'm not saying you're going to take over that department, but there needs to be some awareness that your students are going to need your help when it comes to leaving the institution and moving onto their chosen career pathways. And I think that that's something that we can't ignore, and something that many staff sort of say, well, my job here is to deliver the program. And I respect that, but also your job is to help your students be as employable as possible and to be supportive. We're going to also think about the challenges of staff, about how do institutions ensure that they've got the right staff to deliver the programs. How is professional development for that program, not the institutional profession, but how is it tailored for those staff? And how do staff maintain currency with their professional field? And I think that's really important. What journals are you reading? What trade sheets are you reading? How do you keep up to date? It's different to how it was 10, 15 years ago. You have the information out there. What journals do you personally subscribe to? How can the institution help you maintain currency with your area? We've mentioned the importance of professional bodies and industry. I think it's important that engagement with employers. You are in a privileged position as people delivering the program to be able to engage with employers. If you're the people looking after the on-the-job on-the-job training or student placement, it's another opportunity to engage with employers. As I say, program accreditation is outward facing. It's not about what's happening here, but it's looking elsewhere, whether it's professional bodies, employers, industry, alumni. Remember that it's outward facing. Benchmarking, and I talked about benchmarking and making it meaningful at subject level. Are you teaching the right courses? Are there other courses that need to be, or modules that need to be introduced into this program at this stage? That's also listening to feedback from employers, listening to feedback from students. What did they need more of? There's the international expectations, not just the benchmarking, but if your students are going on to do a master's in your subject, what are the international expectations of the program that you deliver? What are the international expectations in terms of the type of modules that are offered, the courses that are offered, the type of software that students will be exposed to during their period of study? One of the other things about externality is about the extent to which you use external moderation and external examiners in your assessment. I appreciate that this is a feature of Anglo-Saxon, perhaps, models of higher education and not necessarily common across the world, but that's another form of externality. It's a very helpful source of feedback when you've got external examiners and external moderators coming in to look at the program. And I think that externality really helps retain the currency, makes you think twice about what it is you're doing, or confirms what you're doing well. Involving program staff in on-the-job training or student placement is also one of the challenges, because I think very often it's kind of one person who's been given this job of, you're in charge of coordinating on-the-job placement, but you know, how can one person only be involved in that? I think that there needs to be an opening up of everybody's awareness and responding to national needs. And how do you show that your program responds to national needs. I've seen that you've had an OAQHE session on alignment of higher education with the 2040 strategy, but it's about looking at what's required in Oman. I mean, I remember when there was the 1995 Vision 2020, and part of it was calling for logistics and looking beyond dependence on oil and gas. And I know that some institutions started offering programs in logistics and other key areas. So it's good to see there is a synergy between the strategic environment of the country in which you're operating and the type of programs that you deliver. The problem is the lead-in time, and how do you make sure that you're not behind the curve when it comes to providing the sort of students you need. I hear the argument that sometimes we're offering programs and we're qualifying students for a market that doesn't yet exist. And I know that that has been a challenge, and employability has been a challenge, and that's where you need to look at the broader skill sets that you help students develop. So how can you prepare for program accreditation? I think you've got the message. It's really important that all academic staff are engaged within the institution. As I say, it's probably easier to get staff on board for program accreditation than it is for institutional accreditation, because during the visit, certainly the visits I've been involved with, we end up speaking to nearly everybody in the department because of the size of the department and who's involved with delivering the program. We talk to everybody. So it's going to touch everybody rather than a representative number of staff, in most cases, depending on how big the program is, evidently. We also talk to more students. So it touches more people, I would say, program level accreditation, and involves more people. And in a way, people get more buy-in because they feel that they're involved. Engagement with students is really important, as well as engagement with alumni, letting them know about program accreditation. Engagement with professional bodies, whether internationally or in Oman, but I appreciate there are limited at the moment in Oman. And this is engagement with other HEIs offering similar programs. As I said, the problem with institutions is that you won't have any other body within your institution running this program. So it's kind of good to look outside to see who else is running this program. Engagement with employers, engagement with industry, ensure that the resources align with the students' needs at program level. Data collection, I think you've heard me loud and clear on that one. Program relevant data, program specific data, disaggregated data at program level. And one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, you may be interested, whether with the OAAA QA or with the BQA in Bahrain, applying to become a program reviewer. Because if you have specialist knowledge in your subject, we're going to, there are a lot of programs to be reviewed. We're going to need a lot of reviewers in Oman and in other places, like, as I say, in Bahrain, looking at opportunities to become program reviewers. I hope that this has been helpful and that this has kind of made you think about program accreditation. I'm now going to hand over for the Q&A, if that's okay. Handing over to our fabulous hosts. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Tess. Such an eye-opening presentation. I know we've been through the pilot study. The Scientific College of Design has participated in the pilot study for the program accreditation, and I see that the challenges. I really felt those challenges as you were going through the list. I think I can really vouch for these challenges. One of the biggest challenges that we had during the pilot study was data. That we had everything on an institutional level rather than a program level. My question for you is, what in addition to those challenges that you've mentioned for international accreditation?
What are the challenges for?
What are the challenges for the international program accreditation? On top of
yes,
the ones that you for the local one.
Okay, so one of the challenges from my limited experience with international. I was quite involved with ABET at one point. I observed an ABET accreditation, and I also was an observer for the NCATE accreditation. And one of the challenges, I think, and I think both you and Professor Taki will be aware of this, is that international accreditation have kind of been written for a specific context, maybe in the States or maybe in the UK, and they don't always apply to Oman. So they may not have the cultural understanding of how you apply these program standards and this program mapping to Oman. So things like engagement with professional bodies, as I mentioned earlier, there's limited opportunities for that in Oman. And there is an expectation from external accrediting bodies, but there's much closer relationship. And that's not always easy. But for me, it's also the standards and the expectations might not always be appropriate to Oman, because, I mean, for some of the engineering areas, we might not cover that in Oman because it's not appropriate to the country. So I think for me, it's about contextualization, cultural appropriateness. The other challenge is the expense and the length of time that it takes. And it's about, you know, my advice for anybody going through external program accreditation would be to get somebody on board who's been through it and can guide you and help you, because I think doing it without that guidance and help is expensive, time consuming, and without the right advice, you could be making a lot of mistakes and wasting a lot of money.
Okay.
Would you say that that was true? Because both of you have been through it. Would you say that that was your experience?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
indeed. Okay, I would like to make one suggestion, then I have a question. The suggestion is, you know, we have allocated half an hour for question and answer. So any of the audience have a question, please raise your hand. Then we will open your camera if you like and the voice. If you don't want to share the camera, that's fine. So that will be a good, so we do some interruptions to this. My other question, Dr. Tess, sometimes we get confused here because you see there's a lot of challenges coming with blended learning. We don't know how much competition we will have from, you know, overseas. And again, there is a huge requirement, a lot of institutions going through institution accreditation, program accreditation. How important you think for us being, you know, with the limited resources and all those stress is really to work with the internationalization, whether program accreditation or getting the ranking from the professional bodies? Because right now, we don't know the national students and the funded students, they're getting dry. And, you know, there's a lot of competition coming also from the professional bodies. So how you think, how important it is, and what advice you will give us to set up our priorities?
That's a really good question, actually. First of all, I think that's a very big question because it covers a lot of aspects. First of all, the concern about internationalization and that students with the opportunities for online and blended learning, that they may be looking outside Oman for their higher education experience, that I think it's a question of working with international partners to show that what you offer is contextualized for Oman, that has been recognized by Omani employers, because ultimately it's about that engagement with industry and employers that gives credibility and credit to the programs that you're offering. So you may do something in an institution in Australia, but, you know, does it really have case studies about Omani students, have about case studies about the Omani workplace? So I think it's about working in partnership as far as possible to give credibility to your organization. I think the rise of blended learning has created its own challenges. I think rankings is a question for a whole different session about the difference between rankings and accreditation. But it is, I understand that there is a push in the country for rankings to get Omani higher education recognized, at least within the Arab world, to get some sort of ranking. But remember, ranking is an annual thing. It's not based on, it's usually based on self-reported data. that it's, but it is very evident, and students that are coming to Oman from abroad will look at rankings, but also students within Oman will use some kind of rankings to be able to decide where they're going to study. But my advice for institutions, and I've been saying this all the way through, is to be external looking and not to kind of, just because it's coming from internationally, the last thing to do is to kind of hide. The most important thing is to look openly and talk to other institutions, talk to international, but also emphasize to students how the education experience that you're providing is tailored to the Omani context, but also is supported by employers in Oman and shows that it meets the needs of Oman. And I think that really helps convince students that undertaking a program with you, because ultimately it's about getting a job, it's about getting promotion. You know, people's motivation for working is to be able to be more active in the workplace. So you need to show what you offer in terms of that.
Thank you very much. Great answer. Okay, I would like really to encourage everyone to participate. So if you raise your hands, we will open the mic, and if you want the video for you. I would like to take this opportunity also to remind everyone with the two events which is coming up. We have a conference, and we wrote to all the members, vice chancellors, and we have AGM. For the AGM is the time for the new elections. So if you are interested to be part of the board of directors, you can apply. There is information available in on our website. Meantime, please, you know, let's take this opportunity. And if you have any questions, if you want to make any participations, raise your hand. And you know, we need also remember the association is about. Tess, when Dr. Tess when was with us, she was always saying to us, remember, this is from the sector to the sector. So it's very important for us to really get input from the sector. So please raise your hands, and I think that will add a lot of value to today's presentation. Thank you.
While we get some more questions, and Dr. Test, you're right, ranking is actually one of the strategies of the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation. And we've been asked as higher education institutions to align our strategic goals with the ministry's goals. So there is an emphasis now on ranking.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
تفضل.
This is Ghalia with you. I'm just would like to welcome Dr. Tess. I'm working at OOOQA. I heard about you so much. So it is a good opportunity to meet you and to hear your voice and to listen to you. So I hope in the future I will meet you as well, because I heard about you and how the employees here, they benefited from you, from your experience as well. Because I'm newly have moved here in OOOQA. I was in Ministry of Labor. So it's nice, good time or good opportunity to meet you today. Thank you, Dr. Tess.
It's a great pleasure to meet you too, and thank you so much for your kind words. But I tell you what, the team at the OOOQA is fabulous, so welcome on board.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can see two people raising their hand. Anwar, please. Juliet, can you give the mic to Anwar?
Hello, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, Dr. Tess. I'm here, Dr. Anwar from University of Nizma. I'm feeling here, I want to some question regarding about the quality education in the institution. So like that, whatever here, I face the problem in Oman like that, whatever institution have very less I think benchmarking regarding course learning, regarding institutional development, regarding like that employability, and also like that fund generation and and the alumni, these are lacking here. So that's why our institution have very far from other countries like that. If you see UAE and Bahrain, Singapore, and South Korea. This is the one question. Second question is the like that we are our program based on only teaching, so we have to integrate with more like that 50-50 60-40% regarding teaching and laboratory work. Here in our Oman, I visited so many institutions, and I face here have a laboratory demonstration is compared to teaching is very less. So this is the second question. Thank you very much. Can you give me the what is the here?
Okay, Anma, those are very big questions. Thank you very much for your question. I appreciate you coming forward. It sounds like you may have had experience outside Oman as well. When it comes to benchmarking, I think the starting point is always what you know. So if you're based in Nizwa, you've got institutions around you in Nizwa that you can talk to. The issue is, where do they run programs like your programs? And it's about talking to other institutions that run your programs, having those initial conversations before you start benchmarking. I think online benchmarking, you know, where you go to international institutions where they've got their courses and their programs online, and you can just download the program information. I think they can be helpful, but they are just an online activity. And it's different to when you have the opportunity to talk to people face to face. What many people do as well is, if they've worked in other institutions, they go back to their former institutions and they try and get benchmarking or professional links with their former institutions, so that they can have a clearer idea of what's different here, what can be incorporated. I think when it comes to the time between lab work and teaching, it really, again, is looking at the expectations of the program. I'm not an engineer or an IT specialist, so I'm not sure about what the percentages of lab and teaching should be. But it's about looking at professional body of qualification for your area, for your subject area, and having a look at the type of standards that are already out there for the expectations of teaching and lab work. If you don't think that there's enough practical, then you need to look at other areas such as on-the-job training and placement opportunities for your students, kind of help supplement the practical areas that might not be fully covered. However, I don't know about your context completely, and I don't know about which program you're teaching. So my suggestion would be to speak to people who are also delivering your program and professional bodies that are responsible for accrediting your program, to get those external reference points to be able to make meaningful decisions and changes to the program as necessary. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can we go to Holly Ali now, please? Holly, you got the mic, so please speak with your questions. Yeah, can we go to Amna? Holly, I think probably a bit away. So Amna, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Takri, and thank you, Dr. Tess, for the presentation. It was really useful. So I'd like to ask you about probably if you have some recommendations to get some kind of international accreditation, knowing that we have a very low budget to go for the kind of like full-fledged accreditation from an international body. What is your recommendation? Because we don't have any kind of like, you know, resources allocated for international accreditation, but I believe as a director of the academic program that I'm responsible for, that will enhance the quality of the program, and it will help us in our future accreditation from the OAAA. So if you have any recommendations for that, that will be great.
What program areas are we looking at, Amna?
Mass communication.
Say it again.
Mass communication.
Okay, so areas of mass communication.
Yeah, it's like public relations, digital media. It also overlaps with design, so it's that part of social sciences.
Have you done any research yet into the professional bodies that you'd be interested in getting accreditation from?
Yeah, we have the Association of Communication and Mass Communication and Journalism Schools, and it's based in the US.
And you haven't approached them yet because your worry is about the budget, because you don't have enough money to go for a fully fledged accreditation. That's a little bit tricky because obviously these accreditation bodies survive by making money. They have an interest in encouraging people to go for accreditation. And I think it's the sort of thing that's not immediate, but in the long term, I think it's certainly worth approaching the accreditation body. Have you already found out what the costs are that are involved?
Not really, but I understand that it's going to be very costly.
Okay, so my first step would be to get in touch with professional accrediting bodies and to find out what's involved and to look at your institutional budget over a period of time and to work out annually what would be the investment for going for this accreditation. The other thing that you can do is talk to professional bodies, because nobody's going to do it for free, is to talk to them about what advice can they give you in the meantime of how you can improve. The other thing, if not accreditation, because it's true that there are financial implications with international accreditation, is talking to professional bodies within Oman that are responsible for mass communication, is trying to get that kind of input from professional bodies that can look at your program, can look at your curriculum and give you advice on your curriculum. I think there aren't any quick fixes to getting professional accreditation. If you see something that's offering professional accreditation very cheaply, it's because they might not be a bona fide accreditation body. So you have to be a little bit careful of shortcuts, because if they're cheap, it might not be that they're well recognized. Taki and Muna, do you have any suggestions for Amna about international accreditation on a limited budget?
Thank you, Dr. Tess. Yeah, I think you see, from my experience, the first thing really is filling the form, which is whether your institution is eligible or not. If the professional body is convinced, then you can always ask them to give you a free workshop about the processes, what involved. But the biggest challenge is with the professional bodies, they will not give you accreditation if you don't have member of staff or few member of staff who have the qualification. For example, if we talk about CIPD, then you have to have 1 or 2 people who are chartered. And also they can give you advice if you need, people to help you in preparation or submissions, then they can recommend few people. But again, myself being a consultant, I would say, you utilize a consultant to get the knowledge and do it yourself. That's always better than, paying a consultant who will do all the job, leave you without, knowing what's to done. When it comes to the subjects which you talked about, for example, my PhD was in the soft skills, and we do a lot of training in the soft skills. So after the conference, if you want to talk to me about any skills comes, we have about 31 skills under the soft skills, including the communications. I'm sure we might be able to advise you from the association as well.
Thank you.
I totally agree with Dr. Taqi. I think you should approach the accrediting bodies, and they will send you the set of eligibility criteria and whether you're eligible or not, as well as the fees.
Yeah, the annual fees for the professional body is not that big, because usually you pay two sort of fees. In institutional level, that's not huge. You're talking about, you know, less than £1,000 or whatever. But the big fee is when you register the students. When you register the students, that obviously linked to your additional revenue sort of things. If you don't know the way, then I'll tell you it's a big headache. But if you know how to get there, okay, without any shortcuts, then the first journey always is a tough one. But after that, you know, things become very, very easier. Okay, I think we have few people raising their hands. So can we take participation from Rahma, please? Rahma, the mic is yours. Rahma is not there. Can we take the participation from Dr. Rabi?
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, can I go ahead?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Let's finish Rahma, then Dr. Rabi.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. My name is Rahim Al-Ankudi, the head of Quality Assurance, Kaz Nizwa. Thank you for this valuable presentation. I have two questions first. The first one, when any higher education institution go through the program accreditation, and there, I think Mr. Taki talked about this challenge, which is that we have a lot of graduates who have not employed or alumni without employment, and that might affect the result of the accreditation, or that is the result of the process of accreditation. Sometimes that unemployment, not because of that the graduate are not qualified enough for the labor market, but because that like a common problem in a country. So how we can tackle this and how we can face this challenge when we go through the program accreditation? This is the first question. The second question, I mean, do you recommend to go through the program accreditation before going through the institutional accreditation, or that's fine? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your really interesting question. Thank you, Rahima. And hello to Nizwa, beautiful part of Oman. First of all, I'm going to answer your second question first. That within Oman, institutional accreditation is a prerequisite for program accreditation. So unless your institution is accredited, you can't submit for national accreditation. You can't submit programs for national accreditation. However, for professional accreditation, depending on the accreditation body, institutional accreditation is not a prerequisite. The advantage of institutional accreditation for many institutions is that you've already got quite a lot of the data and the documentation that you need to submit to an external accrediting body. However, it's not in many cases a prerequisite. So it depends. If it's national, you have to be institutionally accredited, but if it's an external accreditation, it depends what the demands of that external accreditation body is. Maybe your program has the documentation. As Dr. Taki, as Professor Taki and Dr. Muna have already explained, it's worth approaching the external accreditation bodies beforehand to find out what the expectations are. Your first question, as a person who's been on a panel or looking after a panel of program accreditors, I think I understand that there are contextual challenges in terms of employment, especially, for example, the number of female students that are operating, that are graduating from universities in Oman. It's difficult to find employment for everybody. However, as an accreditor, as a person coming in, what I would expect to see from the institution is not necessarily a magic wand employing everybody, but showing that you're concerned about the degree of unemployed students, the number of unemployed students, and doing things like offering sessions for them to come in to keep up with the currency of the program that they've studied, to keep engaged with the students at program level, not leave it for the institution to keep in touch with your graduates, but you have an active role in continuing to communicate with your graduates, that you have an active role or encouraging your program staff to continue to talk to employers, to continue to engage with professions, and feed that through to your students. I think the saddest bit is when people say, well, our students aren't employed, but we haven't seen them for 3 years. You know, why aren't you getting students in and talking to them and giving them a sense of hope that what they're doing is relevant? You might not be able to find them a job, but you can certainly help maintain their skills. And maybe their skill set that they have is not, you know, applicable to the immediate environment. So how can you encourage them? And this is an area dear to Professor Taki's heart, is how can you look at the transferable skills that they have that means that they can work in a different area? I think it's about managing student expectations before they leave the organization. It's about strong relationships with employers, but it's also about continuing to treat your students as human beings. And just because they've left the institution doesn't mean that they're not valuable and they don't need looking after. Now, I appreciate this has implications for staff time. Nobody has time to give lots of volunteer time to do extra sessions for ex-staff. But if you do it twice a year, that you get your program alumni in and you talk to them about how to look for jobs, not leaving it to the careers services department, but doing it within the program and showing that you care, I think gives the students a bit of hope. And I think as a program accreditor, even if your students aren't getting employed, but you can show that your students, that you're engaging with your students and giving them hope, I think it is very valuable.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Tess. Now we go to Dr. Rabi'.
Dr. Rabi', how are you? دكتور ربيع موجود.
Dr. Rabi' معنا? If you are available, take the mic, please.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. So so I must have not been heard earlier. I was just saying hello to Tess, and lovely seeing you, and thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Dr. Tess and I worked together in the OAAA, and I left OAAA, in fact, last year, but we're still working together with the authority. And in fact, I must congratulate Dr. Taki and Dr. Muna and the team there for these wonderful arrangements for this presentation. It's a capacity building, and it's wonderful to have this gathering. And just to add to what Dr. Tess, in fact, not adding really, but maybe just to clarify from Dr. Tess, is program accreditation a prerequisite for international accreditation? And that's one thing. Or is it also a prerequisite for graduates from certain programs? I know from the healthcare professionals, if they were to work abroad, they need to show an evidence that they have been accredited locally. Is this something that you've come across, Dr. Tess?
It depends on the, absolutely right, it depends on the field. So for example, for the medical, it's about, you know more about the medical side than I do. So you could probably answer that one. But it depends on the bodies. Some bodies require institutions to have national institutional accreditation before they will consider their programs for program accreditation. But that isn't always the case. And in terms of the graduates, it depends on the field. It depends whether they're required to have chartered status or to show that they have their CPD, ongoing ratification of their continuing professional development that is recognized not by the quality agency, but obviously in the case of Oman, it's with the Oman Medical Specialty Board, if I'm right. But I think it's each agency, I think it's worth approaching the external or international program recognition body to be able to deal with that and find out what their requirements are. But I can't talk to all of them. I think it's a case-by-case basis. Would you agree with that, Dr. Rabieh?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think it depends also on certain professions. I know in the medical field, last year there was came a kind of a circular from international bodies that if anybody, a graduate, let's say from Oman, from the medical, if they were to work abroad, say in Europe, they need to show some kind of an evidence that in their country they've gone through some kind of an national accreditation. And I think some of the institutions here, or medical institutions here, have arranged to get some kind of an alignment with some kind of international bodies to show that this their standards are up to that kind of level.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you, Dr. Rabieh. And I miss our morning coffee.
Yes, absolutely. We'll have it together soon once this pandemic is over.
I can't wait.
Dr. Tess, if you allow me, I would like to share our own experience regarding Dr. Rabieh's question. When we participated for the pilot study for the program accreditation through the OAAA QA, it actually made our lives much easier when we're going through the international accreditation, because the standards are almost the same. Every accrediting body will go through the management, the governance, the research part, the student services, almost very similar. I think the differences were just how the standards were put together and what type of self-study they were looking for.
Indeed.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because the idea of the program standards is that they should be generic enough for whatever program the institution's working in.
Okay, very good, very good. I think we're running out of the time. I just want to remind everyone that part of the policy of the association, everyone who attended today will get a certificate. Our administrator, Naima, we might be contacting you to make sure that the spelling of your name is right. Within 2 hours time, you would get a form from the system to evaluate today's event, and probably by tomorrow you will receive copy of the presentation and the recording. I would like really to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Tess and Dr. Muna on behalf of the sector and the association for your wonderful knowledge, Dr. Tess, Dr. Muna for handling this session, and inshallah we're hoping to see you in the upcoming 2 events, which will be in the month of March. And as I said, it's a conference, and the conference is about the internationalization, and the second event is about the AGM. Thank you everyone for your continued support to the association and to the sector. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Tess. It was an honor having you today.
Oh, and what a tremendous pleasure. I tell you, I feel quite emotional talking to all my friends back in Oman and feeling how, all my fabulous positive memories and what a fabulous higher education sector. Never take it for granted, all the work that you've put in to creating the higher education sector that you have in Oman. It's well worth being proud of, and a credit to you all for all the hard work that you're putting in. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Enjoy your weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, Allah.
Bye. Bye, Tess. Nice to see you again.
Bye. Lovely to see you too.
Why aren't we?
Are you still going? Right. I'm going to log out now. Thank you, Dr. Munna, for the invitation. I really appreciate it, and I very much enjoyed being part of it. Thank you.